Hello everyone. Today I thought we would be a little different than normally I focus on aircraft tutorials, which I'm not going to give up on. But today I thought we'd do something a little different and actually take a look at a different game called Homebrew Sandbox. This is a program that is available on Steam, and it's in early access right now, but it shows an awful lot of potential. Our focus for today is going to be specifically on the different weapon systems that are provided kind of in the program, as well as, kind of how to use them, as well as some general tips as well. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and kick things off before you all get seasick. Wah! Alright, let's go ahead and get started. We're now in the builder, which, as you probably know, you just hit the escape key and the build button. You can select something. And for my example today, I've decided to use this kind of all-terrain vehicle slash, kind of weak excuse for a truck as an example for some of the smaller weapons. So to access the weapons, all we have to do is bring up the parts menu, which is down here. Whoops. Just kidding. All you have to do is go ahead and hit the tab key to bring up the parts. Now the weapons are listed all down here at the bottom. As a general rule, they're kind of from weakest to strongest, but each weapon's kind of got its own little perks. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure this weapons that we have an ammo box. Right now, ammo boxes are non-resizable, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'm sure that's something that'll change in the future. I've already gone ahead and welded 2 of these ammo boxes. A quick word of warning about these boxes. Tremendously heavy because of the sheer amount of munitions one carries. So kind of keep that in mind when you're planning lighter designs. So anyway, I've gone ahead and brought those both in. Go ahead and bring up page here with F2, which is kind of the tuner. Here's one of the ammo boxes, and here's the other one right now. So I need to upgrade that one. Nice. So all ammo boxes can be linked to each other, which is a great way to make all your ammunition supplies going into one place. Highly recommend that you do this rather than having one ammo slot for each weapon. That's going to make you slightly crazy. So anyway, let's go ahead and get our first gun, which is this little 9mm pistol. When we first set out to design the weapons and pick what weapons we were actually going to model, we decided to kind of include something kind of small, just kind of an anti-personnel weapon, something along those lines. So we went ahead and selected this little tiny 9mm pistol. Now, if I just place them up on the top, nothing's going to happen right this second because there's no ammunition and there's no way to fire it. But if I bring up the tuner key with F2 once again, you can see I now have this 9mm. I'll go ahead and connect the ammunition to it like this. Then I'll go ahead and have this little output connected to my mouse for shooting. Click here, and I'll click here. So now when I click, the pistol comes firing like this. Given that it is such a teeny tiny round, it is not going to have much penetration. It's not really going to do an awful lot of damage, but it's kind of a fun little way. You can always build these in an array or something like that and kind of have a little bit of fun with them. Now, if we were to bring this into the world real quick, there we are. Whoa. If we were to bring this into the world, you're going to find it exceedingly difficult to try to aim it at anything. So go ahead and spawn that sucker in right now. Again, you have this little teeny dot, and I look around, and the pistol just keeps kind of shooting straight. So in order to make it a little bit easier to aim, you can actually attach anything in this game to a hemi joint or a gun mount. So let's go scoot back to the builder real quick. I'm going to go ahead and delete the pistol with the middle mouse button real quick. I should say delete the link of the pistol with the middle mouse button. I'm going to go ahead and grab a hemi joint. Hear my engine revving over there. It's an electric. There we go. And we got to go find what happened to the pistol. Since I can't find it, I'll just bring another one. Go underneath the world here. Click here. Now, here's a word of warning. If I were to just go ahead and click like this now, and then go over to the tuner, and then link the hemisphere servo directly to my view direction, watch what's going to happen. Uh-oh. Well, it's kind of shooting it like it's a little gangster here, which is kind of useless because it's also pointing right at me at the moment. So, of course, I could go like this and flip it the other way, but I'm still shooting kind of gangster. So what I would recommend doing is hooking up that view direction input before you attach a given weapon. You can also set this weapon to a specific offset or something along those lines if you're working on it. I find that works really well as well. Now you'll notice if I move my head, the pistol goes ahead and follows it, which is super duper handy. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect it back to the ammunition. I'm going to go ahead and connect it back to the actual ammu firing. So now you can see wherever I look, the pistol fires. So now if we bring this back to the world, spawn it in, you'll notice I can now look and it'll shoot where I'm looking, which, you know, that's pretty useful if you ask me. So as far as weapons go, you're not going to see this used too often, at least until there's player damage. But for the meantime, it's kind of a fun little thing to kind of just harass and kind of annoy with. And if you think you're a good shot, you can always try it out too. But as you can see, it's pretty hard to hit anything with it. Now, the next weapon we're going to take a look at is the 50 caliber machine gun. This particular weapon was modeled on something that many of you probably recognize right away. And you'll notice when I spawn this vehicle in the world of the vehicle, the machine gun itself is pointing straight up into the sky. You can actually adjust that by changing the Hemi offsets, or the kind of starting angle after you go ahead and spawn the thing is, by disconnecting it from the direction view. Again, I'm not going to show you guys how to do that, but I know you guys can figure it out, or you can just deal with it. You'll notice as soon as you get in the vehicle, by the way, it immediately corrects itself like that. Now, the 50 caliber machine gun is an incredibly versatile weapon. It has an incredibly high rate of fire. And you can see by the fact that my vehicle is lifting up a little bit that it has a pretty significant recoil as well. This weapon's going to find itself at home in all sorts of different tools. When we originally set out to model this, we modeled it with a couple different kinds of ammunition, but at the end of the day, it wasn't that drastic of a difference of damage and penetration, so we decided to kind of keep it like this and kind of enjoy it like that as well. But this is definitely a great weapon, and it is something that you should have on pretty much any of your vehicles you intend for combat, unless of course you're going up against something heavier like a tank or something along those lines as well. Next weapon we're going to take a look at is the 20mm rotary autocannon. This particular weapon was based on a very famous aircraft-based rotary autocannon that is very popular on especially NATO aircraft. This particular weapon fires an astounding 6,000 rounds of 20mm per minute, which is absolutely staggering. And if you do one of these kind of things, you can just get a feel for just how much ammunition you can put down range. This weapon does have a couple quirks, though. If you were to take a look inside here, first thing is you're going to notice it has a power input. It requires an incredible 6 kilowatts of electricity in order to rotate the barrel quick enough to get that many rounds out. The other thing you're going to notice is it has a round type input. What round type does is allows the player to choose different types of ammunition for different needs. This particular weapon has standard armor piercing, which is a round type value of 0. It also has high explosive, which is a round type input of 1. So if I were to go ahead and just fire now, if you look at the wall way over there, it makes just a teeny tiny little spark like that. But if I come over here and I actually connect the value of 1 to the round type, you'll notice you get little miniature explosions as it fires. I'm going to go ahead and exit and then head back to the game. Now, high explosive, at least at Homebrew at this point, are basically fragmentary high explosive rounds. So what they do is they create little particles and kind of spray them all over the place when they fire. So if you actually look really carefully when it hits, you can see those little tiny pieces kind of shooting around. You can actually see some of them are hitting me as well. Now, armor-piercing rounds historically do not have the same penetration values. High explosive rounds do not have the same penetration as armor-piercing rounds. Now, another thing I want to point out with this weapon too is if I just kind of fire, I'm actually pushing myself backwards because of the incredible amount of recoil in this vehicle. Of course, if I went sideways, I can almost flip my vehicle over because of the incredible amount of stuff you can do. Can change ammunition types on the fly by using something like a shift box or a box. Right, the next weapon we're going to be taking a look at is the twin 30mm autocannon. Now, this weapon was based off a Warsaw-packed weapon designed for attacking helicopters and low-flying aircraft. It has an incredible rate of fire as well as a very large projectile, which actually happens to be the same ammunition as the regular 30mm autocannon. Firing it, you can see just real quick, just the incredible rate of fire and the amount of damage that those individual bullets can do. One of the disadvantages of this particular weapon, other than its incredible recoil because of how large it is the fact that you are not allowed to use other ammo types. It only has a standard armor-piercing round. Of course, against light aircraft that you commonly encounter in the world of Homebrew, this is more than adequate to do quite a bit of damage. The weapons themselves don't automatically rotate on their own. This is just something I set up with a quick little sequence box. You'll also notice on this vehicle that the weapons point forward even though they're attached to a Hemi joint because of the fact that the weapons were kind of preset with an angular offset before I went ahead and started it. The next weapon we're going to take a look at is the 30mm autocannon. Some of you guys might recognize this from an earlier version of Homebrew Vehicle Sandbox. That's completely intentional. but it also provides a really, really nice package and a very, very versatile package for engaging all sorts of different types of targets. Setup is exactly the same. If I pop over to the tuner page real quick, you'll notice that like a lot of the other systems in the game, this one also has an ammunition type option, which is really, really, really handy. This weapon is very unique in that it carries just about every different type of ammunition inside of the game that we have already, each with its own kind of quirks. So just to test that out real quick, we'll go ahead and grab ourselves a good old-fashioned value box. There's one right here. Of course, keep track of where you're putting all this stuff, because you always end up forgetting where you put things. That's kind of a common problem, as you guys know. So anyway, different types of ammunition. Obviously, if I use 0, that gives me kind of a standard type of round. If I use a value of 1, go ahead and connect that to the round type. It's going to give me high explosive, which is a little teeny tiny explosive. Give me a round value of 2, gives me high explosive anti-tank. Giving a value of 3 will give you sabot projectiles. The really nice thing about a sabot projectile, by the way, is it tends to have a very, very good penetration as well as a very high muzzle velocity. So it's a great thing. A heat round on the flip side tends to have a really, really good penetration, but maybe it doesn't do quite as much damage or have quite the penetration of a sabot. And of course, a good old-fashioned armor-piercing round is kind of the best of both worlds without having anything too crazy. Again, you can feel free to adjust these values on the fly should you need. And for those of you guys who are curious, this 30mm autocannon fires the exact same round that the twin autocannon does. The only difference being is there's a couple more ammunition types available to this particular weapon. I have this particular one on a sequencer, so it only shoots in little bursts just like the real one. Next weapon that we're going to take a look at is the 40mm grenade launcher. A lot of you guys will probably recognize this. This is a very, very, very common vehicle-mounted particular weapon. It fires very, very short grenades and has a very, very low muzzle velocity. If I kind of take just a random shot over that mountain there, you can really start to see the drop on that particular thing. It also isn't the wonderfully most accurate thing, as you can also see from kind of watching those little grenades shoot off into the distance there. This particular weapon comes with 2 separate types of ammunition. It comes with high explosive, which is the most popular usage for it, and it also comes with a high explosive anti-tank or keyed round. So if you take a look right now, it has a value of 1 being fed into it. If I change this to a value of 0, it's not going to give me an AP round. It's going to keep it as the high explosive round. It's kind of a neat little quirk that the game has kind of pre-built in there to make your life a little bit easier. But if we do give it a value of 2, it's going to give me a high explosive anti-tank round. Now, a high explosive anti-tank round, what it basically does is you shape charge as a penetrator. So you're going to lose out on having that really, really good fragmentation that you do with high explosive, but you're going to have slightly superior armor piercing qualities. Personally, I think this weapon works great on value 1. One little thing that I find a little tricky with the weapon, unlike some weapons that are very, very similar to it, is the fact that its recoil is actually fairly high given its size. So when we go ahead and use it on a particular armored vehicle, this isn't really an armored vehicle, don't be surprised if it kind of pushes you around as it's kind of watching right now. Otherwise, this makes a spectacular suppressive weapon, and you can carry so many individual rounds with it. I see it often in multiplayer used on aircraft as kind of a method just to kind of rain terror all over the place, but personally I think there are better choices for that as well. The next weapon we're going to take a look at is the 40mm cannon. Some of you guys will probably recognize this if you've seen enough World War II documentaries, but believe it or not, despite the age of this particular weapon, it is still commonly used on a wide variety of different vehicles. This is probably the most versatile weapon we have in the entire game at the moment, and versatile in the sense that use it for just about anything except engaging the most heavy of heavy vehicles. Rate of fire isn't terrible, makes it fairly useful as far as engaging just about anything. Obviously, a fast-moving aircraft is going to be quite a project. Another thing I wanted to observe as well is right now this particular weapon is not actually attached to my mouse, but you'll notice that as I'm going over these bumps down here on the ground, the thing is automatically keeping itself a little level to make it a little bit easier to try to track a target. I find this to be a great method, and I'll show you guys in a minute how to use this particular method. But believe it or not, it's often better to stabilize the seat you're sitting on, because your view will change based on the ground, more so than it is the weapon, and then trying to go ahead and use, the keyboard and mouse to try to engage vehicles. Again, this is completely up to you, and there are some wonderful methods out there to kind of alleviate some of this. And you guys can kind of figure that out on your own. Anyway, if we were to go ahead and take a look at this particular vehicle, as well as this particular weapon in game, I just lost it. There it is. You'll notice that it handles every single ammunition type in the game, and I should say that we've simulated so far. Now the advantage to this is that you can quickly on the fly change the different types of ammunition you want. You can use an AP round, you can use high explosive, you can use a heat round, and a sabot round as well. In general, the sabot round is going to give you best penetration along with the heat round. The high explosive, of course, is going to have a pretty good size explosion that's going to come out of it right now. So again, if we wanted to go ahead and do something along those lines, we can grab ourselves a value or a shift box. In this case, I'm going to grab a value box. Go ahead and mount it somewhere. Head over to the tuner. Go ahead and plug it into the round type. In this case, I'm going to use a high explosive round, which is round number 1. So notice when I fire now, get a nice little explosion. But notice just how high of a muzzle velocity this particular weapon has. Very, very impressive, and it's going to get you a long, long, long way. The next weapon we're going to be taking a look at is the 82. Now, the 82mm mortar is based on the real-world 82mm mortar. So if you can manage to find a firing table for it, you can actually use those values to very, very accurately go ahead and deploy your projectiles wherever you want. The ammunition is just high explosive, unfortunately, so you can't go ahead and do anything silly like use, high explosive anti-tank or AP rounds or anything along those lines as well. One of the neatest quirks of this particular weapon is the fact you have the ability to change the number of charges the actual mortar is using to fire with. Right now I've got it on 1 charge, which gives you a pretty low muzzle velocity. So if I go ahead and hold my little control for shift box, we'll take a look at this in the builder in a second. All the way up to 6 charges, look at the difference in velocity when the barrel leaves. Oh. There we go. Yeah! Now obviously you can reach about 3.2 kilometers with a shot like that, fired at 45 degrees. Dropping the number of charges all the way down to 1. Get a range of about 500 meters or so, which isn't too bad, but again, you can see the difference just in those little teeny tiny dots in the sky, just how far they go. You can use real-world ammunition charts for this particular weapon in order to determine the distance, and some people actually try to build little like automatic computers into their vehicles themselves, make it a little bit easier to aim these particular weapons. Setting the number of charges is done the same way of setting the ammunition type. All you have to do is plug in a value directly to the thing that says charges. Let me go find it. It's right down here. In this case, I've got a good old-fashioned shift box being rounded down. I think I used the T key. There it goes, and you can see the number of charges going up. There's a little display inside of the thing as well that gives you a fairly good idea of how many charges you're using at a given time. Again, great weapon for shooting projectiles over the heads of your opponents, at the same time as doing a considerable amount of damage just because of the blast radius this particular weapon has. Fire like this, you can get a feel. I don't mind the 50 caliber rounds. You always have to. Oh yeah, nice. Last but certainly not least is the 125mm cannon. Now, some of you guys might recognize this particular weapon from certain Warsaw Pact tanks that came in the late 1960s and probably still used today, but any coincidence is purely coincidental. This particular weapon represents the most powerful and accurate weapon that we have in Homebrew at the moment, and it also is extremely versatile, carrying a wide variety of different types of ammunition. You can see that just leaving the barrel right there, just getting a feel for how quick that thing comes out and how large of a shell that it fires itself. My particular tank here, it's kind of a knockoff of something you might recognize. It's really garbage. I know what he said I could build. But it has a little 30mm cannon to kind of help out its incredibly larger cannon here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and exit back into the world here, so I can show you some of the neat little features that this particular weapon has. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and spawn that sucker in. Nice. Okay. There we go. I have a little thing attached to the zoom key. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So what I have on my weapon itself is I actually have a little one of those distance measurers to give me an idea of the target range before I actually fire. On the lower left side, that value that says the word type gives me an idea of what type of ammunition I'm using. Presently I'm using high explosive rounds because there is no default, I would say, armor piercing round in this weapon. So just giving you an idea of how fast this thing fires, that's a range of 1.5 kilometers away. This is going to be with a high explosive round. Wow, that does a lot of damage. Next type of round we have is a high explosive anti-tank round. Again, much smaller explosion, but it has almost 640 millimeters RHA of penetration, which is amazing. Then finally, we have the Sabo round, which is one of my favorite weapons / rounds of this entire game. This thing travels at 1.8 kilometers per second to get to its target. And you can see that even at a distance of 1.5, I could basically point the mouse exactly like, for example, if I wanted to hit this little block right here, I could virtually point the mouse right at it to hit it, even at those kind of distances. This is a spectacularly damaging weapon. It's also very, 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 very effective at destroying just about anything in the Homebrew universe. For those of you who are looking for specific penetrations, this thing penetrates about 675 millimeters RHA with the high explosive anti-tank round. Now, one thing to notice is that all armor in this game is capped at 400 millimeters, so that no matter what, this weapon will always damage whatever you're pointing at. Granted, very, very, very large weapon. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to make a stabilizer. Now, when I first set out making vehicles with this new weapons update, I'd always make the stabilizer on the gun, which really doesn't make sense if the hemi joint is aiming at what you're looking at. But since your seat is not stabilized, your view can obviously move and make your gun do one of those kind of things, which I'm sure will give everybody in the audience a headache. So the stabilizer is pretty easy to do, fortunately, because of some of the tools. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my little chair here. I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. I'm going to grab myself a hemi. Too bad it's not the kind of hemi most people think of when you think of hemi. Careful when you place this that you don't accidentally grab something that you didn't want to grab. Alright, let me try to get in there and rotate that sucker. Good. Go ahead and take my seat. Very, very carefully click right here. Very, very carefully click right here. Go ahead and adjust it so it's roughly in the same position as this. It's a little higher, and of course we can always sneak in here like this and move things around. But for the sake of demonstration, we're not going to worry about that too much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get a gyrometer. Be very careful with the way this is facing. This is forward. I know it's got little arrows on it that point to the left, but or not, that's forward. When you go to place this, make sure you place it facing forward. It's nice and obnoxious, and obviously don't flip it upside down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get my gyrometer. Go ahead and get my little servo here. Is this our servo in the back? Yeah, it's our servo on the front. Good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the, first of all, we like to see that we put it in rotation correctly. And put a value in here. Ah, perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect pitch the rotation 1. Then we'll go ahead and use a -1 because we want it to be opposite the angle. Then I'm going to connect roll to rotation 2. And also go ahead and leave the -1 alone. I'm just going to say a multiplier of 1. See, 5 is going to tilt us out. Perfect. That's it. Stabilizer made. The only thing I need to do now is go ahead and reconnect all the different systems that I just lost. Because unfortunately, I went ahead and disconnected my original driver's chair, which you can see is not too much work to go ahead and do that. First, we want the one that does all the damage to be connected to this guy. All right, can't wait to test it out. Now, if you get this backwards, or for some reason the hemi is backwards, or perhaps the seat is backwards, or something along those lines, you're going to know right away, but it's usually simply a matter of going ahead into the program and adding a -1 for your angle multiplier. I don't know why there's a big piece of yellow in my way. Aw, bummer. Alright, sorry about the little glitch there. I had to go back and fix a lot of the boo-boos I just made when I was setting this all up. So anyway, if I go ahead and get in my seat, you'll notice the vehicle works exactly as normal. I can go ahead and aim my weapon anywhere I want. But what I want you to observe is I'm going to go ahead and hit some bumps. You'll see that my view remains exactly where I'm looking. Which means if I'm going over extremely rough terrain, such as the terrain that I have up here, you'll notice I'm always able to keep my weapon exactly where I want to aim. Now, people who like to make boats, like myself, this is the most wonderful thing that ever happened. One problem you do have sometimes when you stabilize, obviously you can see my seat's kind of bouncing through, is the fact that it can make it a little bit more difficult to drive and realize you're about to flip your vehicle. The other problem you can have is when you do something silly, like going off-road like this, whoa, you can get something that kind of does one of those. But personally, I think its benefits far outweigh any sort of potential problem it has. Because now you have an absolutely perfectly stabilized weapon that allows you to place your shots on it consistently whenever you want. It's also possible to stabilize by doing a specific heading as well, as a lot of modern tanks do. But I usually avoid that option because I find it's just a little bit too much work for a benefit you really don't need most homebrew engagement. So anyway, I hope you guys found this video sort of interesting. Looks like we're getting some excitement down at the bottom. But if you have any questions, just kind of put it down in the comments below.